We all know what the initials DC stands for, Daniel Cormier. But on a night like tonight here in Las Vegas, Nevada, just outside the T-Mobile Arena, it also stands for Double Champ. Welcome everyone, my name is Luke Thomas, and to my right, your left of the screen, is Shaun Al-Shatti. This is your MMA Fighting UFC 226 post-fight show. Well, Shaun, what can we say? My goodness, I was there for the McGregor winner of Alvarez in New York, and that had a big sort of Irish flair. We all know the story there. I have to say, this one wasn't about one man, and the McGregor story is bigger than that too, but this was not about one man representing a nation per se, but this was about one man finding something I think he'd been looking for over 20 years of athletic accomplishment. Let's start with, first of all, your general reaction. Daniel Cormier is now your UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion, stopping Stipe Miocic with a right hand in the very first round. Frankly, one of Daniel Cormier's easier UFC fights, if you actually think about it. Your reaction to him becoming the second now champ.
It's just unbelievable. It's surreal how much one night can change in this sport, or how much one night can change your whole career, your legacy in this sport. Daniel Cormier comes into this fight as someone who was always the bridesman. I mean, he was the light heavyweight champion, he is the light heavyweight champion, but he always had that John Jones stain on it. It was never going to leave. And now within one night, in what, 3.5 minutes, all of a sudden, he has a completely different legacy. He is maybe one of the greatest heavyweight fighters ever. I think that's fair to say. I think he's possibly a top 2 all-time fighter, if not one. I wouldn't put him there yet, but I'd say top 2 easily. He's one of the greatest just fighters of his generation, all with just one night. He washed away all of this and completely changed the narrative of his career. It's utterly amazing.
You said something interesting when you were on the MMA beat last week, where you had noted Michael Bisping had this pronounced end to his career. Not the 2 losses, but of course becoming the champion in that last chapter. Well, look at Daniel Cormier. Now, he had been champion before, but again, with the losses to Jones and having the title handed back to him, now he has something 2 ways. One, as he noted, divorced from John entirely, but also it's the end of his career. How significant will this be in terms of the way he remembers him, not merely for what he accomplished it, but for at the time frame he did it in that overall chapter? Remember, he's done in March.
Absolutely. I think it's very significant, right? Because he's going to end his career he's already planned it out with this Brock Lesnar fight and maybe one more. We'll see what happens. But he's going to end his career with this grand explosion, basically. Whatever this fight was, and going back to the Uzdemir fight and then the Brock Lesnar fight, if he wins those and just kind of rides into the sunset, he's going to be remembered as, again, one of the all-time greats. And this is a guy who just a year ago was crying in the center of the octagon at the lowest point of his career. It's surreal how quickly things can change.
What did you make of his post-fight remarks talking about him holding the cards? He's saying, still done on that hard deadline in March around his 40th birthday, but he's not fighting Gustafsson. And he's not, he might fight Gustafsson if things change.
Yeah, that's the one.
But the Curtis Blades, no. The Derek Lewis's, no. Uzdemir's again, no. He's not doing that. It's big money fights waiting for Lesnar, who won't be back until January at the earliest because of his USADA pool re-entrance, the whole thing. But about those comments, I found them a little bit surprising, right? Because on the one hand, I get it, right? You're trying to make money. On the other hand, titles bear a certain degree of responsibility. So I wonder what you make of what he had to say.
Well, you know, I understand where he's coming from, and I don't fault him, honestly, because there is no real contender at heavyweight. Who's the obvious guy you're going to throw in there? There's no real contender at light heavyweight. I mean, maybe Curtis Blades, you would say he's the obvious guy. But Daniel Cormier has 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, I'm not sure. I can't do math in my head that quickly, left in his career.
So August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. 8.
There you go. Fingers always work.
Yep.
I feel like he's earned the right to sort of do the Michael Bisping route and just kind of lay out his own plans. Because again, Curtis Blades is a great contender, but I don't think anybody is screaming for Curtis Blades to fight for the heavyweight title. It makes sense to me, and I mean, let's be honest, you said this to me a little bit ago, the UFC is due for a big pay-per-view. The sport is due for a big pay-per-view, and whether people like it or not, him versus Lesnar will be a big pay-per-view.
So let's talk about those antics we saw in the ring, or I should say the octagon afterwards. He beat Stipe Miocic.
It felt like he was in the ring.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. So Brock Lesnar comes in. First of all, when Brock Lesnar is an unhinged goon, there's nothing better in MMA. I'm sorry. I love everything about him.
I love your anti-pro wrestling so much, but you still love the Brock Lesnar goons. Because
the Lesnar who spat when he beat Frank Mir, who headbutted a chain link fence, he can do all that pro wrestling stuff. I don't need to be sold on that. I need to see that gorilla who just comes back to life, who is totally a feral animal. But I'm wondering, there was some belly aching on Twitter about the professional wrestling antics. And again, I'd rather have carbonic acid thrown in my face than watch. But at the same time, MMA needs a big pay-per-view, and I'm sorry, that will work in the end.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the antics are what they are, but that's what is involved to set up big fights, right? Like the Conor McGregor dolly throwing, no one liked that. But whenever he does fight Khabib, we're going to see that footage over and over.
It's total nihilism, right? Whatever works, use it.
Absolutely, and this is going to work. We're going to see that shove a billion times now. It is what it is, man. I mean, we all kind of knew this coming in. None of this was a shock to anybody. I mean, when Brock Lesnar showed up in the arena, it was just like, okay, this is probably going to happen.
It was interesting. Someone asked him, I think it was Brian Campbell of CBS, was saying, well, you had objections about Jon Jones and his relationship to your career and whether or not he's involved in these GOAT debates because of his PED issues, and those are still being worked out to some degree. But how come Lesnar gets a free ride? And I loved Cormier's answer.
He was honest.
I make the rules now.
Yeah.
He reminded me of that scene from, what's the movie with Tom Hanks where they get the pirate, Castaway or whatever, not the, you know what I'm talking about? Where the pirate takes over the ship and he goes, look at me, I'm the captain now. Yeah, that's what it was. He was the captain now, even if there was a degree of contradiction. Point being, and the question goes to you is, do you have any issues with Jon being sidelined in the way he is, and then Lesnar just coming right back after having his own issues however many Julys ago?
Well, on one hand, it doesn't matter about Jon, because I don't feel like he's going to come back within this window where it's even an option for him to even be in play with DC. With Lesnar, I just go back to it's not a surprise, man. Like, this is how the UFC operates. This is how the UFC's always operated. Brock Lesnar is going to do what Brock Lesnar wants to do, and Dana White will be happy that he's doing it. If you want to complain about it, you can complain, but it seems pointless, to be honest.
Your top 3 fighters of all time, do they include Daniel Cormier after tonight?
Absolutely. I still have GSP number 1.
Me too.
But Daniel Cormier is my number 2, man. I just can't give Jon Jones the credit in there if you fail 2 drug tests. Same with Anderson Silva. Same with these guys, man. If you are a known cheater and you have this history, you can't. It's not fair to lump you in with the guys like a Demetrius Johnson or a Daniel Cormier who just don't have that mark on their record.
Nevertheless, the one thing that I wanted to make note of is I always, people are going to accuse me of having too much praise for Cormier, but on a night like tonight, I don't know that you can have too much. And I just feel like I wonder what you make of this. He embodies so many of the positive challenges that sports offers you. To be this long in his athletic journey and only now have the rewards, that is such perseverance. Yes, he's athletic and yes, he's talented, but also, don't you feel like more than just being a great representative for MMA, he is an example of the character building that sports can offer if you really ride it out to its full potential?
Absolutely, man. I mean, just even the past two years in this International Fight Week July type of zone. You think back 2 years ago, UFC 200, finds out that Jon Jones, and he was the last second, he still wants to fight Jon Jones. He wants to sign a waiver to fight him even though he popped the drug test. And then last year, again, we talked about what actually did happen when they did fight. And through it all, DC has kept such a positive mindset, man. He has always been so forthright, so forthcoming, and so honest. I think honest almost to the point where it feels his journey feels personal in a way that I think a lot of people's don't. And it's just a credit to him, man. I mean, this is a guy who started his MMA career after an already decorated wrestling career in his 30s, and he still did all this.
39 years old, talking about the bumps and the bruises. I mean, I'm no world-class athlete, but at 38, I was like, I see you, DC. And that takes us to the other competitor here, and I have to say, what a model of class and strength through defeat that Stipe Miocic was. I don't want to bag on Ronda. She had a big week here, getting to the UFC Hall of Fame, and that's all great. But to watch Miocic with his face messed up, coming here, and he wasn't happy, obviously, but answering all the questions, being very matter-of-fact about it. Were you not impressed?
Oh, absolutely, because not only was he not happy, he has a baby on the way. His first daughter is imminent at this point, her coming into this world. So for him to be able to take that time, even though it wasn't a lot of time, I mean, credit to him.
Now, he did lose badly, as I mentioned, maybe one of Cormier's easier wins, all said and done, but he did look good a little bit early there. Yeah. 35, not as old as Cormier, another good athlete. Cormier believes he'll be back, and I know it's sort of cliche to say that, but I actually do kind of think he's going to be a ranked contender for some time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think once DC's out of his picture, there's probably a good chance Stipe picks back up this title. I mean, he was a record-breaking heavyweight champion for a reason. He is statistically the most decorated heavyweight champion in UFC history for a reason. I think he'll be right back there.
So that takes us to the co-main event. I don't have a whole lot to say about it other than it was an unmitigated disaster, and it went two different directions. Well, it was, wasn't it, right?
I mean, not for me, because Mark Ramondi's going to be doing a shoey tomorrow.
Oh, right.
So that's fun for me, but otherwise, yeah.
I'm going to hawk the biggest loogie in that Nike. Wait, and you
Oh,
just
God,
watch.
I can't wait.
All right, but here's the point. Lewis, I can give something of a pass to because he got injured, and we know that the back injuries have been plaguing him for some time. This is not the first we've ever heard about them. Even in UFC Embedded this week, do you guys remember this? He was getting the cupping at the UFC Performance Institute right on his lower back, so we know it's a real thing. How much of an excuse, I don't know, but what happened with Francis Ngannou? Do you buy that he got that sort of David Loiseau treatment? Like, Rich Franklin beat David Loiseau, he was just never the same afterwards. You take a prolonged beating earlier in your career when you don't have to, it can change you. Is that what happened, or something else happened?
It was puzzling because there was so much fire between these guys at the weigh-ins and all throughout their rivalry, really, where once it finally happened, it seemed so anticlimactic. Francis Ngannou was not doing anything. I mean, Derek Lewis, despite his injury, was still at least throwing some punches. Francis Ngannou seemed very content to just kind of lay back and bide his time for something, waiting for some kind of moment. And he definitely got thrown under the bus by Dana very quickly. I mean, Dana White talking at the post-fight press conference about how Francis Ngannou's ego got the best of him, and his ego was the downfall. Who knows about that? But it was puzzling, man. And my heart, I just wonder. I feel bad for Derek Lewis in a way that this back injury has been lingering. It's been ongoing.
But he didn't lose, and even Dana White said today he didn't lose stock. Now, he might have lost stock with the fans,
sure,
but at least it sounds like internally they still value what he has done and what he brings.
Sure. I just wonder how much this back injury is really going to hamper his career. I mean, this is a reoccurring thing. Even when he lost to Mark Hunt, he wasn't really able to fight. I mean, he was just throwing kicks because he couldn't do anything because of his back. This is a reoccurring thing. At one point, he retired because of this.
Right.
If you remember,
right?
If this can't be fixed, it feels like it's going to be a waste of potential for Derek Lewis.
That takes us to some other strong performers. How about Mike Perry? Look, I don't know about the whole doing the 23andMe so you can drop the N-word. I don't understand what that's about. I really don't. But you know what? You talk to the guy, you do not get the sense he's a bad person at all. In fact, he kind of reminds you of being a big kid, to be perfectly honest. And I think that also tells you about his fighting style. He was going in there and just with this youthful exuberance overwhelming people because he has good firepower. Well, what we saw today was good firepower and good strategy and good tactics. A very grown man's performance, no?
Absolutely. I think Jackson Wink Mike Perry is a thing because like you said, that was a very mature, measured, but still a very powerful performance. When he needed to, he was still throwing, the power shots that he needed to. But otherwise, he was fighting very tactically, and it was a very interesting shift that we sort of see with him because all week he was mentioning to us, that he sort of got stuck in Florida because things were working. And he always wanted to just be this traveling Ronin, going to these different gyms. And now that he's doing that, he feels alive again. It was an impressive performance, a really fun fight.
Did Paul Felder make a mistake? Here's the thing that I noticed. Technically, I didn't find him to be outmatched, although I do, again, acknowledge just the tremendous growth that Perry has shown as a fighter. But it was one of those moments where I was like, you know what? That's a true welterweight versus a guy who's weighing in at welterweight. Paul Felder hits hard, and I still felt like he was at a real noticeable disadvantage. He had that giant Hasim Rahman, hematoma, the cuts. I'm not talking about the headbutt, but the one that was on the side of his face.
Oh,
My God, Mike Perry, you got to be a real big welterweight to withstand the onslaught. And I know that Paul Felder wanted to get a fight. I know that he must have been incredibly frustrated losing that James Vick contest for late August. Was it a mistake to come back like this, though?
I think for him, I don't think he thinks it's a mistake just because he needed a paycheck. I mean, he had 2 fights ripped out from under him very quickly back to back. I think he just wanted to fight at this point. And ultimately, I don't think he loses much from this. I mean, this is a man who was drenched in his own blood, crimson mask, full on, alien growing out of his head, broken arm. And in that 3rd round, he was still in that pocket, slugging, throwing with that broken arm. The guts on that man. I don't think you can come away from that fight feeling anything about Paul Felder other than just incredibly impressed with his guts.
But I do want to see him back at 55.
Agreed.
I just feel like it's a much better division for him. Now, that brings us to 155. Michael Chiesa losing to Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis has one of the best finishing guards in all of MMA.
God.
Not the kind of guard that's necessarily hard to pass because he doesn't play it that kind of way. And people are like, well, he sets it up with his hands. Right, but that is still a very good guard independent of that. That's just the secret sauce that makes it all work. Here's a guy that has this fearsome reputation as the guy who runs on the wall and knocks out anybody. Could have fought K1. Duke Rufus told me that he had offered to fight K1 Max back in the day, and he has more submissions, I think, off of his back than anyone else, certainly in UFC history. It is shocking to see a guy like that.
His hips are so active, and he's always just attacking in very tricky ways. Submitting Michael Chiesa, I'm not sure if this is exact, but I think the odds for Anthony Pettis by submission was something like plus 800 or around that range.
Whoa.
Because Michael Chiesa is one of the best submission artists in that whole division. And that was a nasty triangle armbar. That whole sequence was just gorgeous. Anthony Pettis kind of feels like Showtime was back. Like, that's the best he's looked in ages, man. And it was interesting in the lead up to this fight. Duke Rufus had said something to the effect of 6 months ago, he had a conversation with Anthony, a very private conversation, where he told him straight up, if we're going to move forward, you need to be about this life, and we need to change a lot of things. And Anthony said that within the past 6 months, he's grown more as a fighter and a person, more than he had in the past 3 years combined. And it really showed tonight.
I also liked something he told me. He goes, I stopped reading MMA websites, I stopped reading MMA blogs. I think it's actually a good idea. A lot of fighters get too much input from the outside world, and some of it may be right, some of it may be wrong, but it's not the right kind of input, to be quite honest with you, a lot of the time. Sometimes I suppose that it is. My only point being is, he just decided to get back to what the kind of fighting he liked to do. Because when you like to fight a certain way, chances are, not always, but chances are you might fight better. He wanted to be the guy that gets out there and strikes, and if you want to go to the ground, he submits you off of his back. You got to see, it was vintage Anthony Pettis. And a fact that no one's talking about, Michael Chiesa was the higher ranked fighter. He was at 9, Pettis at 12. I think he probably bumped back into the top 10 after this, right?
Absolutely, and even at the very beginning of the fight, I mean, Michael Chiesa gets him down against the fence in the first minute, and it's just like, oh, okay, this is what this is going to be again. Totally got up quickly, did what he needed to do. Impressive performance from Showtime.
And then the last of that main card, you had Khalil Roundtree taking on,
oh my goodness,
frankly, kickboxing legend, one of the best heavyweight kickboxers ever, in Gokhan Saki. Gokhan Saki looked a little off physically to me. I can't quite put my finger on it. He's never been like a super buff guy or anything like that, but he's usually looked a little bit bigger. Maybe it's getting down to 205. That's not necessarily ideal for him. I don't know. Here's what I do know. Khalil Roundtree has been dialed in all week. When you talk to the guy, he was like, he kept telling me, just wait, just you wait. That is something that a prospect who you knew was good needed, because his development has been a little bit up and down.
I mean, he just won a striking battle against a kickboxing legend in 96 seconds, I believe it was, something like that. That is unbelievable. And Khalil Roundtree, I mean, this is a guy, Anderson Silva, years ago. You remember this? Hyping up Khalil Roundtree, watch out for this guy. We saw him on The Ultimate Fighter, and he almost was disappointing in a way, because it was so obvious that his wrestling needed work and his grappling needed work, and it was so easily exploitable. This fight changed nothing about those thoughts, but when it comes to strikers, he is a delight to watch.
He truly is. Now, that's our entire UFC 226 main card. Any bright lights for you from the prelims?
Oh, there were many. It was a very fun card up and down. I want to mention two in particular. Dan Hooker at lightweight. Oh my goodness, that man is a beast at lightweight. He has long said, the move to feather, that when he was at featherweight, he was fighting cloudy. He was not fighting intelligently. He just couldn't think in there. At lightweight, he's fighting like a beast, man. This is Israel Adesanya, his teammate, and what a weekend that gym has had.
Good weekend for Kiwi fighters, huh?
Oh my gosh, he should be getting at least a top 15 opponent soon. And then the other one, Paulo Costa.
Whoa.
That fight against Uriah Hall, what can you say about that? That was really impressive.
I actually thought Dana White's summation was really good. He goes, he's good looking, he's got a great physique, and he fights like hell. I was like, yeah, that's basically about it. He also gave some props to Uriah Hall. We probably should too. I thought he went out on a shield and fought in a very committed way. But what really got me was we talked about the firepower with Mike Perry. Oh my God, the firepower from Bohachinha is absurd, and his hand speed. Brazil has needed some young stars to replace the ones who are aging out. They're going back in September. I'm wondering, I know it's still early, who's still in the prelims for crying out loud, but how far can he go, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, he's already targeting the top. He called out Chris Weidman after this fight. I don't know if he'll get it, but it's obvious Dana White likes him, the UFC likes him. That's an interesting fight, man. Chris Weidman didn't get that title shot against Kelvin. The UFC has a proclivity for rushing these kind of guys when they really target them. I don't know, but I think, also, I just want to add, How the hell does that guy make middleweight?
I don't know.
It makes no sense.
What is
at
his
all.
body fat? It has to be less than 1% or something.
It makes no sense to me, but man, I can fight. No kidding.
A great entry to the middleweight division for sure. I want to give one more shout, if I could, to Rafael Sunsao. Beating Rob Font. He just continues to have activities, or rather I should say fights, that people are like, oh yeah, that's respectable if you just want to respect things. But Rob Font is a very good fighter, and he got outclassed everywhere. And I have a lot of respect for Rob Font. Rafael Sunsao no-sold all of it, and then got on the microphone and tried to call his shot. You have just in less than a month, Cody taking on TJ. You think Sunsao gets the winner?
I don't think so. I don't know. It always feels like there's something missing in it. Even tonight, he said that was the first time he had ever talked to Joe Rogan in a post-fight interview. The man's like 11-2 in the UFC. That was stunning to me.
TJ Dillashaw is the only bantamweight fighter to have beaten him since 2011.
It makes no sense to me at all. But I still feel like Marlon Moraes is ahead of him in that division, just purely based on what the UFC...
Who, by the way, Sunsao beat. Right.
Just purely based on what the UFC wants from challenges.
It was an incredible card. Any thoughts about the week? I know you guys did a post-fight show about last night in Israel Adesanya, but we had the Hall of Fame, MMA awards, where we cleaned up again. Anything else sort of stand out to you about this whole weekend? It was terrible to lose Max Holloway. I felt like it kind of was a good week for the UFC. Good, strong gate. We'll see what the pay-per-view numbers look like, but I don't leave here... So much of MMA Twitter, and I don't want to base the whole world on MMA Twitter, but it's so very negative, and I understand why. I don't get the same feeling being here as I do when I read some of the tweets from afar.
Yeah, I mean, even today, it felt like, and this morning, it felt like, there was excitement in the air. It felt like a big fight. And I think ultimately, despite how bad things looked earlier in the week with Max Holloway and the Brian Ortega situation, and then even DC falling, and there was a moment where it's like, oh man, is this happening again? Ultimately, the UFC leaves this weekend with a lot of very perfect matchups almost. They leave with a lot of really good storylines that they could push. It seemed like everything that they would have wanted to happen kind of happened. Izzy winning, Israel Adesanya winning, obviously. The DC Brock Lesnar thing, that's going to be huge. Paulo Costa, all these various people won who I would imagine the UFC like to have won.
It was an incredible night, an incredible weekend. One last thing, DC might stand for Daniel Cormier, it might stand for double champ. You know what also it stands for?
Jesus.
District of Columbia. We're just outside the T-Mobile Arena. I never got to wear my jersey when the Stanley Cup playoffs were going on. I had to do it. This is the last time I'll wear it for one of these things because I wore the MMA beat and everyone got bitter. But one last time I just wanted to say, shouts to the Washington Capitals. I always have something to look forward to when we go back to T-Mobile because that's where they actually clinched the whole series. So I had to make it all about me. You know how we roll.
I feel nothing about any of this. Arizona Coyotes don't exist.
I'll just say this to close it. If you want more from Shaun, you can follow him on Twitter. We'll put everything in the description box below. And of course, MMA Hour on Monday. It continues, it rolls on. We'll have more on Anthony Pettis' guard. We'll have some cool guests. We'll have the sound off. That goes live at noon East Coast time, live from New York City. So until then, that's Shaun. I'm Luke. Get some sleep. Congratulations to all the winners. See you on the road next time.